Hello everyone, this is Erin from the Burnett branch of the Warren Public Library. I want to welcome you to this presentation on an introduction to genealogy. Today's presentation will show you how to trace your family tree with free tools available to you through the library and online. If you have any questions after watching the presentation, please feel free to leave a comment or contact any of our branches for assistance. With that being said, I'd like to introduce you to our presenter today, Cindy Connect.
Good day or good evening, everyone, depending on what time you're joining us for this introduction to genealogy at the Warren Bush Branch Library. We're going to be talking about genealogy and family history. Genealogy, strictly speaking, is the study and tracing of your lines of descent, your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, etc. Family history includes that, but it also includes so many more details about the study of your entire family and siblings and the details about what made their lives special. When I was a kid, the book Alex Haley's book Roots came out in 1976. And that was about how his family originally got to the United States and how he listened to his grandmother and her sisters talk about the African who was brought through to the United States and was enslaved here. He turned that story of his family into a book of historical fiction, which sparked a tremendous increase in the study of family history. I know it did for me. I was 13 when I started doing my family history. One thing I want to make sure that you're aware of is to cite your sources. It's a fancy way of saying, where did the information you've collected, where did it come from? Whether it came from a family member, oral history, a government document such as a birth certificate, death certificate, marriage certificate, or will, or if it came from newspapers or books, or what we have today, the many websites that have a tremendous load of information. This way, if anyone questions how you got your information, you can tell them exactly how you reached your conclusions. So you begin and you want to start with yourself and work backwards. Go through your house and see all the official documents you have lying around, old letters, newspaper clippings, pictures and photo albums, and then write down what you know. Don't start off by trying to prove you're related to a famous person. You'll get there or find out you're not related by working steadily backwards, generation by generation. I've seen a lot of people who want to prove they're related to George Washington or whoever. You can't be descended from George Washington, or George never had kids. But you see what I mean, that you want to start with yourself. After you've searched around your own home, that's the time to start calling or writing or email and texting members of your family. I know from researching my own family history that older members of the family, of the same family group, like the older siblings, can know a lot more about the family history than younger ones because there were more older people around when they were little than for their younger siblings. If you never talk to your cousins or siblings or anyone about what they know, you're going to be surprised by what you learn because everyone assumes that everyone else in the family knows that story about how grandpa did this or great-grandmother did that or where they came from, and that's certainly not true. Never underestimate the importance of cousins. Usually in each generation, there's one or two people that is interested in the family history. So if you're trying to find family history on your great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents, you'll usually find what I think of as comrades in arms or friends that will help you because they're studying the same lines of the family as you are. I started off when I was younger using a biographical outline so I could focus on one ancestor at a time. A biographical outline is a timeline of one ancestor's life from birth to death in chronological order. Most computer software programs on genealogy will do that for you. Some topics to include, if you're just writing it by hand, would be the birth, marriage, and death dates of a person. For each census year, include the city, county, and state where they live, because records are kept usually at the county level, but sometimes at the state level. So you need to know where they're at certain points in their lives. You'd want to put their children's birth dates, year of immigration, if that's relevant, names of siblings, that type of thing. The big three facts that you'll be searching for are names, dates, and places. Names. Remember that names are often misspelled. I can vouch for that. For example, I have a cousin named Sitko, C-I-T-K-O. I've seen it spelled at least 8 ways, including S-I-T-K-O. And I did see an article that said the name Smith had been spelled 34 different ways. And if they can mess up the name Smith, what can they do with your name? You'll want to keep a list of the different ways that you'll find the family name spelled. And also remember to search for people not only with their last names might be misspelled, but they might use their nicknames instead of their legal names. They might use middle names or they might use initials. That was pretty common back in the 18th century when men were listed by a first initial and then a last name. There are different ways to write down dates. If you're just taking your notes, when I'm taking a note, I'll put the date in this order, 4 July 2009, for example. Why is this? Well, if you go to England and you look at their dates, if they abbreviate it, the 4th of July is listed as 4709 instead of 7409. I like writing out the full year, like 2021, instead of 2 digits, because that'll keep the century straight. Sometimes you have multiple people in your family that have the same first name. In mine, it's the name Thomas, and there might be Thomases in the 18th, 19th, and 20th century. So if you have the full year, then you'll never get confused about it. Some of the genealogy software programs available give you a choice on how dates are displayed, so you can make that decision. When taking notes, I enter the place name with the name of the city. I put the county in parentheses, the state, and then the country. You can use the state postal code if you want to save space in your notes. Most public records, well, not most, but often public records are kept at the county level. So it's important to list the county where your ancestors are from, and that's easy to look up. Geography or location. My family happened to come from an area on the map. If you see here on the right-hand side, toward the middle, Lucerne and Lackawanna County and Monroe County. And they all intersect in that one little area. Boundaries changed over time. Counties were divided and places were renamed. For example, my grandparents lived in Bucks Township, Lucerne County, Pennsylvania in 1870. In 1880, Jacob and Fanny lived in Lehigh, Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania. The thing is, they didn't move. They were still in the same place. And my father once told me, he said, the barn was in one county and the house was in another. So they're kind of hard to find records for because I don't know which county to look at. You have to look at all 3 that intertwine so that you don't miss out on finding information. Okay, From the Warren Public Library Genealogy Guide page, this is the web address for it, or you can just go to the library webpage, warrenlibrary.net, click on Research, Recommended Databases, and then Genealogy. You can print out free charts and forms by scrolling down the genealogy page to forms and then select either Family Tree Magazine or Ancestry to download forms to print out. That is when you're doing research and you just want to print it down on paper, but you're perfectly welcome to use an app on your phone so you can enter data too. There's so many different ways to do research and all of them work for you. This is an ancestral or pedigree chart. And this is the type of chart you fill in when you just want a list of your parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents, and so forth. Family group charts. Those are good to fill out. Once you start entering data into a genealogy software program, you can have the software program print out information in a slew of forms, a variety of ways, I should say, including a family group chart. So once you enter the information on a person, you don't have to keep rewriting it on different pieces of paper. If you have relatives who have resisted the computer age still, you can send them a blank family group chart to fill out, but always include a self-addressed stamped envelope if you want it to come back. I did that with my Uncle Jim, and that was one of the only 2 letters I ever got from him in my entire life. Some people make the mistake of saying, you know, Grandma, write down everything you know about the family. Well, if Grandma has 10 brothers and sisters and they all have families and they all have families, that's an overwhelming task. So you want to make it easy, or at least easier, by giving them a form to fill out. Software. I started out using a free software program provided by the Mormon Church, the Mormon Church, pardon me. That software program, they discontinued because now you can go to their website and put your information on their website. These are names of and links to different software programs, and hopefully by the time you're looking at this, you can go to the website and click on those links for software. There's no one right or wrong software program. Each has pros and cons. It just depends on what you're looking to do. By the way, my software program I saved on non-floppy disk, meaning the square disks they had when computers just started back in the late 90s. Okay. Vital records are birth, marriage, divorce, and death certificates. There's a website that's on the genealogy page called US Vital Records. It's at the bottom of the website under Vital Records. And let's click on that and go to it. Let's see if it will. There it is, okay. And this is interesting because it lists all the states. And it explains how to order birth records online. Let's check Michigan, for example. There it is. Michigan Vital Records Office, County Vital Record Offices. Originally, vital records were kept at the county level, and then eventually they went to the state level. And some records may still be at the county level. Here it talks about how for birth certificates, the cost, they have them since 1867. You can order online or by mail. Yeah. They're all 1867 except divorce records, which started in 1897. Now, I have to tell you, since I last did this program, a lot more vital records have been coming on websites like Ancestry.com and MyHeritage and all those different databases that are out there. So you're going to be checking in a number of different places to find your birth certificates and so forth. And this applies to other countries too. I know I found for marriage records, my mother's was born in Canada, so her aunts and uncles were born in Canada, and all of their marriage certificates from the 19 teens are online, so I didn't have to order them or pay for them. So be aware of that. I used to talk about the Social Security Death Index because that was a way of, if you bought a copy of the application for a Social Security card, that would include the parents' names. But there are so many different databases that, excuse me, that do that, that you don't have to go to the Social Security Death Index anymore unless you want to take a quick glance to see the date or month and year of death for someone. And that index, by the way, only goes from 1962 to about 2014 when they changed the law. And it only includes people who actually collected Social Security at the time of their death. Okay, let's go back. So we've looked at the US vital records from vitalrec.com. I always want people to obtain a copy of the vital records because even if you think you know all the facts, you might find something interesting in them. One interesting thing, especially for death certificates, is they give the medical history of why that person died when they did. I mean, besides accidents, it could give you clues as to the health issues that some of your relatives faced. Okay, my favorite vital record website, as I think of it, is a website called Find a Grave. It's free. And we're going to do a search for one of my ancestors called Caspar Hauser. This is how it looks. Find a grave here in the upper left corner. And you put in the name. Good old Caspar spelled his name in several different ways, so I had to double check it last night to make sure I had the right spelling here. So you put in a name. I don't have his birth year handy, so we're just going to go with that because I found in the past there weren't that many people named Caspar Hauser. Okay. It says 5 matching records. So I'm lucky. His name isn't John Smith. I recognize the second listing as my ancestor because I knew he lived in Monroe County, Pennsylvania. So I can click on his name. There it shows his birth year, 1744, or birth date, and death dates, 1800. So you click on it. It's amazing what's on here because the person that provided the information talks about his parents. So now I have another generation back, including his mother's maiden name, which was also Hauser. And no, her name wasn't, but well, yeah, her father's name was Felix Hauser and her mother's name and maiden name. It says when they got married, their children, the tombstone inscription written in German and translated, and down below, someone was kind enough to link all the members of the family that are also listed on this website. So you can click on another ancestor and find more information. And that person did the same thing. Now, not all searches are going to be that detailed. Believe me, I know that. But you can still get useful information. Now, I didn't bother to put my father's information in this website, but just for fun, I searched his name. Let's see, 31 matches. Okay, that's not too bad, but I don't want to look through 31, so I'm going to this line that says refine search right next to what I put in, Thomas Connect. And I can put in his birth year, since I know that, and the year he died, 1995. And I click on search. Now, the odd thing is find a grave. My father doesn't have a grave. His ashes were scattered at the church where they went. But there he is listed. I can click on it. And someone had gone through the newspaper and they saw someone who's listed. Let's see, was he listed as a veteran? Well, I thought he was listed on his obituary as a veteran, but it doesn't show it. But somebody knew that because down below, all the other information says World War II veteran, US Navy, when he enlisted and when he left service. There he is. There are his parents, further links, and two of his siblings. I added Elizabeth Connect Wilson because I knew that she had passed away, but she wasn't linked, so I sent that information in. My dad had two brothers, but they're not in this database, so you couldn't link them. But I wonder what person had added this information on my dad. So I clicked on the name, and this person has added 58,000 memorials, or 58,000 people. He does 150 a week, it says. So he's one of the volunteers that keeps this going. And I'm going to send him a message and thank him. Now that I know I can do that, send message. You have to register. It's a free registration if you want to make any changes, corrections, or whatever. You send it to, like they have an editing board, and they decide whether that information that you're providing is good or not. So let's see. Photos, the photo they have is the actual obituary from the newspaper. So that's a wonderful source, and you can get some information, some wonderful information. One ancestor I looked up, it showed his and his wife's grave, and right next to it were these other two people who happened to be another set of great, whatever, grandparents of mine. So just be aware that happens. Okay. Obituaries. Many libraries and historical societies have newspaper microfilm collections of newspapers. Here in Macomb County, there's actually an index that you can check. You'll want to check the local paper where your ancestor lived at the time of death and their hometown paper. Like if they moved to Florida, their obituary could be in Michigan because that's where they're from. However, a lot of the online databases already have obituaries indexes and so forth. And there's another website called newspapers.com that has a collection of obituaries online. You will want to use your local library when we can all get in again. And the librarians can help you get started on the computer if you don't have, well, obviously if you're looking at this, you have access to some kind of computer or other. Currently, the online databases are available, at least Ancestry Library Edition is available through the end of March 2021. Have to double check about MyHeritage and see if how long you can look at that. Librarians, for the most part, I'm telling you a secret, they're not interested in genealogy and don't know how to research it. However, they're trained to search for information. Help them help you. Learn to ask specific questions. A general question would be, I'd like to find information on my great-grandfather. What do I do? Well, they're going to be clueless most of the time, unless they've been doing some research. But if you ask them a specific question, how do I order a birth certificate for my great-grandfather who was born in Macomb County in 1890? That's a question that they can answer for you. So be sure and use specific questions when you're asking for help, whether it's in a library, historical society, or whatever. I've mentioned Ancestry.com and Ancestry Library Edition a few times already. Ancestry has 3 versions that I can see. There's Ancestry.com, which is free on the internet, and it has about 1,800 databases with links to the pay databases where you can build a free family tree online on your home computer. Then there's Ancestry.com, where you have a personal membership where you pay a certain fee level by the month or by the 6th month. And that has up to over 31,000 plus databases and 9 billion records. And then you have Ancestry Library Edition. Okay. I looked up an article on Ancestry.com, and it has 6 simple, mostly free ways to use Ancestry.com. And we'll put this link somewhere on the website or in the program so that you can access that article, or you could just go look it up. It's in a free article in Family Tree magazine. And that'll explain how to use Ancestry.com. Ancestry Library Edition, the differences between Ancestry Library Edition and or Ancestry.com and Ancestry Library Edition. We'll just look at it for a second. This article explains what Ancestry.com has that are not included in Ancestry Library Edition. And it's really talking about the pay membership Ancestry.com rather than the free one. And mostly that difference is the family tree that you can put on. Let's see. Okay. All right, this is Ancestry Library Edition. In the far right corner, it says Suburban Library Cooperative. So that means it's part of the library. That's our library here, Warren, is part of the Suburban Library Cooperative. And there's a lot that you can do with this. You just have to look through. They also have a lot of tutorials and videos on YouTube that explain how Ancestry Library Edition works. So if you don't really know how it works, of course, then you'll want to look at some of those. It says search over 262 million obituaries from newspapers.com. Okay. Newspapers.com is one of the companies owned by Ancestry. It started out as an independent and they bought it. And they were doing that a lot. Here you see it says search census, search vitals, the vital statistics we just went through, search military records, search immigration. Across the top, It has message boards where you can leave message for people. Like I'm looking for the Smith family in Warren, Michigan in the 1800s or whatever, or Macomb County. Warren didn't become a city until the 20th century. Charts and forms, new collections, all things you can explore right now. Okay. Okay. Oh, I forgot to show you one other thing. Let's see how this works. I tried this earlier and it worked, so. I'm going to sign in to Ancestry.com with my membership. Oh, I already did. There it is. I didn't sign out. It shows my last name, that I have 577 people in my tree. A search box where I can look up information. But that's the biggest difference between Ancestry Library Edition and Ancestry.com at home or with a membership. So at home with using just the free Ancestry.com and also the membership that you pay for. So you can click on a tree. And here's members of my family. And here little Ancestry uses a little leaf to show you that it has hints for you to look at. 2 Ancestry hints, and you can click on that. Then it shows US Social Security applications. You can review it and decide if it's the right information. So I clicked on review. And they asked, is this the same person? Yep. Lena, who I called Aunt Helen. She always used the name Helen, but her legal name was Lena. And you can say yes down here in the green square. You can approve of the information if there's any new information you want to add. I already had her birth and death dates, so I didn't need to do that. And I have Lena in the box on this side, so I don't need to add any of that information. But if I'm not mistaken, if I click on Life Story, no, Life Story turns the facts that you've given Ancestry into a story. Here are the facts just in the timeline, like I was talking about the biographical timeline you could make. And here on the side, or in the middle rather, are sources. And this is what I was talking about, cite your sources. These are all the sources that I have about her or one of her 2 husbands. On the side here, it shows parents. You can click on siblings and it'll show all the siblings that she had. And it's very easy once you've played around with it to enter information and to edit information and so forth. I got a little rusty, so it's a little harder for me at that one point, but it worked out in the end. Ancestry has been gobbling up companies lately, in the past 10 years, that is. We've already looked at Find a Grave, my favorite. They've purchased something called Roots Web, which was one of the original websites for genealogy. They've bought Fold 3, which is a database of original military records. They have newspaper.com, which is searchable, and they bought Archives, which is a collection of family and local history books. I do want to mention newspaper.com specifically. I was playing around with it earlier, and I put my own name in, And I found myself listed multiple times for programs like this and others that I'd done over the years. So that was kind of fun. But I also did a little research on my grandmother and grandfather, because my aunt had always told me that back in the day that there was a newspaper article that mentioned them, and it was talking to a judge about prohibition and bars, and apparently my grandfather was picketing to make sure that there were bars, and my grandmother was vehemently opposed, and the judge asked, "Are you a suffragette, ma'am?" And she said, "No, I'm not." So that's all in the paper, and that's part of our family history. So that's the type of newspaper articles you can find by using newspaper.com on Ancestry Library Edition. My Heritage. Okay. According to what I read, because I haven't researched it very much, My Heritage Library Edition is strictly a search-based research tool. That means that you cannot add any information of your own. And down here I list the elements that don't exist in Library Edition, including the ability to build a family tree, receive matches, collaborate with family members, and connect to other users. That's what you can do on regular myheritage.com. And I believe there's a fee at different levels, just like Ancestry. That seems to be the way that things are going. National Archives. These are the most requested topics in the National Archives page. Let's see. Census, military, immigration, naturalization, land records, and passport applications, but there are many more. And that's a website that's on the genealogy resource page for you that Warren has. So you can just come to this page and play with the different record groups and see how they work. And you get a pop-up message. Okay. Census records is probably the biggest thing that people use, and it was the first thing I used years ago when you had to actually go to a library and get on a microfilm machine with microfilm and scroll through and try to find people. Now you just type it in. It's a whole lot better. Let's see. For the census, in case you don't know about it too much, we just had one recently, of course, the 2020. It had different questions, what, only 5 or 7 questions this year or last year? This is the history of the census. It started in 1790, so the US government could see how many men there were of military age. Between 1790 and 1840, because it's every 10 years, only the head of the whole household was listed by name. In 1850, that changed. And from 1850 to 1880, each person listed, between 1850 and 1880, each person was listed by name. Former slaves were listed by name beginning 1870. 1890 census was destroyed in a fire. There are bits and pieces of it. There's actually a veterans census from 1890, so you can find Civil War vets that way. And then from 1900 to 1930, it gave more information, but there were different questions asked each census. According to what I've read, the 1950 census should be released in 2022. The 1940 was released in 2012. And there's a great resource guide here, the 1930 census resources for genealogists, which explains how that works, plus all federal, state, city, and international censuses. That one link gets you to quite a bit. So these are some of the questions, or not, pardon me, the answers to questions that they wanted. It would ask how old a person was at a certain point, their state or country of birth, parents' birthplaces, that helps, marital status and years married or age when first married, their occupation, which is always fun to know. I found out one ancestor was a raftsman. The value of their home and personal belongings. I like the 1900 census because it gives the birth month and year of each person, as well as the number of children a woman had given birth to and how many were still living. The 1930 census asks you if your family owned a radio, which was high technology back in the day. There are a lot of pitfalls to census research, though, if you're looking to depend on that for your information. So you can go to this website and research your heritage genealogy online census research. It has quite a few, more than a few broken links in it, but the information is still valid. And it talks about, let's see, we're just doing a scattering of it, searching today, because each of these topics you could actually spend a lot of time on. You can't believe everything you read in the census because sometimes people didn't know the answer. Sometimes the census taker asked the neighbors about your family and they answered as best they could. The person answering the census might not have spoken English very well. So there's a lot of reasons why the information, you have to take all the information you see with a grain of salt and look for other sources of information to verify it and agree that this is the truth. A lot of children were listed in these households that might have not have been children, but nieces, nephews, or grandchildren. And stepchildren are often mistakenly put under their stepfather's last name. So if mom married a second time, John Smith might have, and like she married a Jones, Jimmy Smith might become Jimmy Jones. So that wouldn't, so you'd want to double check on that. Two wives might have the same name because a lot of names were pretty common back then. Not everyone in a family group were actually family. They could be farmhands or miscellaneous relatives. My dad was a lodger in 1940. Members of the family might be in different places. My grandfather was enumerated with his grandparents in another county because I said, okay, this is my grandma, great-grandma and great-grandpa and all their kids except mine. So that's why that might happen. There might be misleading death information. You need to pay attention to location to make sure, let's see. If you can't find an ancestor in an index, locate a map that shows the townships and then check the census for that township. Errors are everywhere. Don't ignore other household members. So you want to go through this and with, because I'm using a rapid fire here, but at least it's there for you to use if you want to, okay? Research in the military records. That's a whole other kettle of fish. I like a file that I think you would, at this point, you still have to order from the National Archives, and that's the pension records, because the veteran or his widow had to write down everyone in the family and all sorts of personal family information in order to qualify for the pension. There's immigration records in the National Archives and websites like Castle Garden. That was the precursor to Ellis Island. It was from 1830 to 1892 is when immigrants went through Castle Garden. And I'm not going to try it because when I tried it this morning, the search engine wasn't working and it gave me all sorts of gobbledygook. Ancestry Library edition has some passenger lists from many other ports in the US and the world. And then, of course, Ellis Island. You have to, when you go to that website, you have to register, but registration is free, and then you can search. And that's the biggest port where over 12 million immigrants came through. Naturalization records. That is also a wonderful record to find. And let's see, oops, let me go to Ancestry again, if I can find it. All right, so I can search for my relative under immigration and travel. Well, not immigration, it was naturalization. Let's see. Oh, that's the closest one, so we'll try that. And I put in his name. He was from what I call Russia, Poland, because parts of Russia became part of Poland later on. Stanislaw. I'm using him because there are very few people by that last name. Here's 1 through 6 of 6. You can have literally, like if you put in John Smith, there might be a couple of million of hits, depending on how you search. But you can go run your cursor over the title and it shows information from the file. Okay, and this one is my relative because I know Michalina is his wife and Boleslaw is his son. Stanislaw was Americanized to Stanley and Boleslaw was Americanized to Ben. So that's how names can change in families too. Let's see. Oops, let's go to the top. That's the petition for naturalization. All this you used to have to send away for and pay money for, so now you can just print it out. And it gives a whole bunch of information, where he came from, his birthday, when he petitioned for naturalization, what court, where he was born in Russia, the names of his children at that time. He actually had about 7 or 8 by the time they were finished. They came from Bremen, Germany, that's the port, and came into New York City. And the ship they were sailing on was called the Brian. And they had to repudiate all allegiance to Nicholas II, Emperor of all the Russias. So I just loved all the information that's here. He has 2 witnesses to that. Both occupation minor, because he was a minor too. Let's see. And there's one form that shows that has his signature on it, but it's very poor quality, so you couldn't really read it too well. But that's why you'd want to look for a naturalization record, okay? So after that wonderful naturalization record, we go to saving what you see. Even if you print out each census image or save it on a flash drive or send it to the cloud, I believe in using a blank census form to transcribe your family's information. It helps you kind of internalize it better, but it also makes it easier to read because you can turn the paper upside down and read the column titles a little easier. Local resources. Okay. Well, US GenWeb covers the world. It was started as a volunteer effort to cover the whole country, state by state. There is the US GenWeb for all the states, so you can look up whatever state your family's from. There's the Michigan GenWeb, and then there's that lists all the counties. And then you can go to the local Macomb County GenWeb. Okay. And there are all sorts of different record groups. Each of these boxes is a different set of information. And these websites, the US GenWeb generated websites, there's a basic level of information you need to have in order to qualify to maintain it, but then you can add all sorts of things to it and make it really, complete. And they usually have a message board where you can put in queries. So I'm looking for the Smith family in Sterling Heights back in the day, and you can communicate with other people also looking for the same families. Get rid of some of these here. All right. There's a World Gen Web, so that helps too. There are links to archives of different countries, like the Canadian one where I mentioned I found information. Italy, United Kingdom. United Kingdom has Genealogy, which sounds Japanese to me, but it stands for Genealogy in the United Kingdom and Ireland. And it has a lot of good links on it. Do you realize that if you go back only 10 generations, you have 1,023 direct ancestors? Although some could be duplicates depending on who married whom, cousin-wise. So if anyone ever tells you that they have finished doing their family history, ask to see it. If you watch the genealogy shows on TV, they'll concentrate on 3 or 4 or 5 at the most when they do a show about a star or tracing their family history. They just pick certain ones. If you want to try to go back 10 generations, though, you have 1,023 direct ancestors. I think it counts yourself there. If you're feeling a little overwhelmed, take a deep breath, make a list of the first five things you want to do, and then begin. Here are some additional ideas. 10 ways to preserve your family history. Leave a paper trail. So print out the results of what you have, put it in a notebook, save it on a flash drive, send it to the cloud. Don't just leave loose papers in a file drawer. Distribute copies to family members, whether they want one or not. Most people don't want one at certain points in their lives, but when they get older or they start having kids of their own, they get an interest in family history that they may not have had before. If you have old family pictures, be sure to identify who's who if you possibly can. Use a photo-safe pen or pencil to write on the back. You can't assume that everyone is going to know that that's grandma 50 years from now. Time goes by really quick, and all of a sudden, well, my mom's 98 and she's the only one that could look at her family, her dad and all his siblings and his parents and name who was who on that picture, which was from about 1910 or 1912. So I made sure I had her identify them, and then I sent copies of that picture and who's who to 3 or 4 different family members so they could disseminate it among their brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews. You want to make copies of pictures using your phone or a scanner. A lot of family members aren't going to let you borrow them to take them somewhere to make a copy, so take something with you to make copies. And then you can send what you've taken to other family members and they can print them out at home or email to a store to print. Another way that's a lot of people don't think of is there are recipes in your family. And my Aunt Lo, who married into the family, she and her family had a Pazook family cookbook, and it had about 50 of their favorite recipes. And it's truly a treasure for that family to have those recipes all in one book that all the family members have, and they can later on down the line make copies and give to their kids and grandkids. You could scrapbook your heritage if you're into scrapbooking. You can interview and or journal. Interview your family members of all ages, but especially the oldest generation using your phone or video camera or other device. I like to not wait until they're in their 90s because, as with my mom, she can no longer, she wants to write her legacy, but she can't remember the details anymore. So be sure and do it when people are in like their 60s and 70s and can tell you all that information. Make copies and share. You could create a list of questions that you want everyone to answer, as well as general questions. Also, share what your family is like today. What are your hobbies, traditions, games, private jokes? What's special about and to your family? I mentioned earlier about medical history. When possible, include medical conditions and cause of death while researching, since many diseases and medical conditions can be hereditary. But be sensitive to people who might not want other people to know that their family member had mental problems or committed suicide or things like that. Be sure to be sensitive about that. You can create a private social media space for your family information. I haven't done that for my own, but there are ways to keep a Facebook page private and just invite certain people to see it. If you live near the historic family homes or cemeteries, take pictures of those houses inside and out and cemetery headstones for the far-flung relatives. Although now with Find a Grave, those headstones are available for everybody to see, but maybe Find a Grave no one has taken a picture of for your family. Like in my family in Pennsylvania, they haven't quite covered 40 Fort Cemetery in 40 Fort, Pennsylvania. So I might have to take a trip out there and include that. It's nice to have what your house looks like today, because then you can all laugh at it in 30 years and say, what was I thinking? Harvest gold they had in the 60s. I remember that. Okay. And please write your life story, even if it's just a couple of pages, because you are just as important as any long gone relative, especially to your own children and grandchildren. You might have noticed a common thread throughout these tips. Share your research as you go along. That way, if there's a catastrophe, like a hurricane or a house fire, your family history is preserved. And that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you got something out of it. And when you can get back in the library, let the librarians know, oh, I saw that workshop and I figured out some things. Enjoy yourselves. Bye-bye.